to the first video in this series. We're going to look at the different parts of an MCQ test item. Before we could start writing our questions, we have to look and recall what is the learning outcome. You might call the learning outcome something different, like a class objective or a subject-specific skill. Our assessment should align with the learning outcomes in our teaching activities. This sample quiz question is an example of a question you might ask that does align with the outcome of ingredient identification. If we look closely, we see our outcome. Identify the different ingredients used to make traditional cocktails. The question that goes with it, what is the main spirit ingredient used to make a mojito? A mojito is considered a traditional cocktail, and we're asking the student to identify the main spirit ingredient. Now let's break down these elements a little more closely. First, we write the stem, the actual question we are asking. What is the main spirit ingredient used to make a mojito? Remember, this should not be random. It should be related to the learning outcomes or subject-specific skills. Next, we write the correct response. Then, we write the distractors or the alternatives. This question writing methodology allows us to look at each element as a separate, distinct component before we look at a complete test item. We will now look at each of these items a little more closely. Later on, you will see additional video tutorials specific to writing an effective STEM and writing effective responses. The STEM is most often stated as a question. In the example on the left, we see a question, identified as the STEM. Sometimes we might need additions to the STEM, such as images, diagrams, or other types of visuals. In the second example here, we see an espresso machine. If we have the objective for the student to be able to locate and identify the parts of an espresso machine, this image is going to be useful in addition to the STEM in order to help the student do that. So here we look at what is the name for number 13. In order for the student to be able to really be able to identify the parts of the machine, they need to be able to see it. If our objective was to describe the functions of the different parts of the machine, the STEM might look different. But here the image is helping the students to respond. In the example on the right, we have one of the most famous hotels in the world. In order to be able to respond with where the hotel is located, there is an image of the hotel with its famous construction. Deciding what format to use for the STEM goes back to the learning outcomes. Be sure that you are designing the question based upon what you expect your students to know at the end of the class or session. Now that we've seen the STEM, let's look at the choices, the correct response, and the distractors. We have a STEM. What is the spirit ingredient used to make a mojito? We first have to write down the correct response. The correct response to this particular question is rum. Now that we know the correct response, we can construct the distractors around that. I take a few spirits, gin, vodka, whiskey. They're all plausible because they are common spirits used to make cocktails. I do my best to write alternatives that are similar in length and structure. After this, we now have the structure to complete the entire test item. I have the possible choices in alphabetical order, which we'll talk more about later, in order to avoid bias. So with the choices, the first step is write the correct response. Then we write the distractors. Finally, we complete the test item based on some of the best practices that you'll learn about in the next lessons. Now let's recap. First and foremost, we have to recall what is our learning outcome for the session. In this case, identify the different ingredients used to make traditional cocktails. We have to do this before we can begin writing our test items. So now we go down and we see a question. What is the main spirit ingredient used to make a mojito? This is known as the question STEM. We look at A, B, C, and D. These are known as our responses. In this case, response A, rum, happens to be the correct response. The other items, B, tequila, C, vodka, and D, whiskey, are known as the distractors or the alternatives.